Hello everyone, my name is Alberto Quesada. Today I'll be discussing Chapter 29, The Making of the Industrial Society. The industrialization is a process in which an economy is transformed primarily from agricultural to the manufacturing of goods at large scale. This process is done with the use of machines, which create a faster production, and with the industrialization, the factories were implemented and also a new system of production called assembly lines. By mid-1800s, in Great Britain, Japan, and China, the industrialization was stimulated due to their dynamic economies. High agricultural productivity resulted in great population growth and it allowed cities to develop. These all were also commercially sophisticated economies. Great Britain started to run up against ecological obstacles that threatened their development and growth, as they were the deforestation and soil depletion. So they finally came to the decision of implementing the exploitation of coal to keep their economy afloat. Coal was a great alternative to replace wood since there was a lot of shortages of this material. It was used as a fuel alternative for the engines in the mining industry, and it was also a big advantage for Great Britain since there was big deposits of this material in the land. Colonies in the Americas started to provide many raw materials which brought relief to British necessities such as beef, grains, cotton, and sugar. Britain started to develop itself in the cotton industry by the mid 1800s due to the high demand and quality of the clothes. The demand of clothes and other cotton related products pushed Britain to find a way of speeding up production. The mule was first created to spin cotton, and later the power loom was invented for the mechanical weaving. These two inventions permitted the increasing volume at a low cost. Cotton accounted almost 40% of Britain's exports. A chain of innovation in other sectors began with the mechanization of the cotton industry. In 1765, an efficient steam engine with general use was invented by James Watt to power mechanical devices. This new artifact did help accelerate productivity in the textile industry even more. In 1709, the British began the use of coke instead of coal, which was cheaper fuel to produce iron. The British iron production increased thanks to the use of coke. In 1856, Henry Bessemer built a converter that made it cheaper to produce steel in large amounts, which was more resistant. Steel eventually substituted the iron that was employed in tools, machinery, and structures. The innovation in steam engineering and in metallurgy encouraged big improvements in the transportation sector. In 1815, George Stephenson built an efficient steam-powered locomotive with an efficient consumption of coal. In the 19th century, engines were refined for the creation of steamships. Both the steamship and the locomotive became revolutionary and low-cost methods of transportation of passengers and capacity for big amounts of cargo. The rising demands encouraged the evolution of the worker environment. The employers switched their place of work from their households to proto-industrial factories which allowed larger units of production. Workers began to perform specialized tasks in one place. Later on, the production system evolved and the factory system replaced the proto-industrial factories. This type of system started to be characteristic in industrial economies in the 18th century. Its main characteristic was large developed machines that were employed in large-scale production. This type of system divided production into different operations with specialized tasks per worker. Average employees used to work between 12 and 14 hours, 6 days a week. Workers became dependent of their jobs, which included a low salary. There were also punishments for the laborers when they were not meeting expectations, and factories presented an unsafe environment with their large machines. Between 1811 until 1816, industrial protests took place against the factories' unfair conditions and implications. Organized workers, also called Luddites, fought against low wages and unemployment. They destroyed machines and their movement had popular support. In 1813, the movement died with intervention of the government. Great Britain was the pioneer of industrialization. It was the first place where the industrialization occurred, and from there it spread across the world. At the beginning, they decided to prohibit the exportation of machines to keep an advantage over the neighbors and the world, but more profitable opportunities outside caused the machines to be sent abroad. By mid-19th century, the industrialization spread to France, Germany, Belgium, and USA. The French Revolution set stage for industrialization in France, abolishing trade barriers. In Belgium, they implemented the industry of coal, iron, textiles, glass, and armaments. In France, it was textile and metallurgy. In Germany, the industrialization took a slower pace due to the political instability. In 1820, the American industrialization took its first steps in New England with the cotton textile industry funded with investments of entrepreneurs. In 1870, the industrialization started to spread to other sectors such as the iron and steel industries, which emerged in Pennsylvania and Alabama. The USA was an advantageous territory with abundant natural resources. An important contribution for the evolving factory system was made by Eli Whitney. He created an interchangeable parts system in the making of firearms. This system consisted of pre-designed machine tools that could be used by an unskilled worker for the creation of a specific product. Sometime after, this system spread to the production of other models. In 1913, Henry Ford introduced the assembly line for the automobile production. Ford designed a conveyor system that transported parts to the workers at a certain speed, and each worker would perform a specialized task at a point in the assembly line. This allowed a decrease in cost and more accessible prices for buyers. Industries represented big investments, which was a high risk, so it pushed the organization of businesses at a large scale so it could reduce risks and maximize profits. Soon after, the corporation was created. The corporation surged between 1850 and 1860, and it became the most common form of business in the industry. Corporations started to control most businesses that required large investments, and they were benefited with high support of banks and other entities. In the late 1800s, businesses were seeking to build monopolies to eliminate competitors and risk over their own investment. Small businesses started the creation of associations to try to avoid monopolies in the market. Trusts and cartels controlled the supply of a product and the price in the market. Some monopolists controlled through vertical organizations, which basically controlled all facets of the industry. One example was John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company. Other monopolies took in practice the horizontal organization to eliminate competition by absorbing them. The industrialization caused increasing concentration of the population in cities. The industrialization permitted an increase in the material standards of living. People could afford having more things like clothes, furniture, and tools. People of low and middle class were especially benefited with these possibilities. Standards of living increased with the industrialization. Between 1800 and 1900, population in America and Europe rose in a large margin. Fertility rates increased and mortality rates fell remarkably thanks to better diets, medical advances, vaccines to control diseases, and improved sanitation. At the beginning of the 19th century, the fertility started to decrease because of birth control through contraception, and mortality rates kept decreasing too. It all led to a demographic stabilization. Industrialization and population growth caused migration to larger cities and the beginning of urbanization. London was the largest city in the world by 1900 with 6.5 million people. and intense air and water pollution started to develop due to the increase in urban populations. There were overcrowded apartments in the cities, occupied mainly by industry workers. Overpopulation in European cities encouraged many to leave the continent in the search of a better life. A vast amount of Europeans migrated mainly to the USA during the 19th and early 20th century, and it transformed Americas into a such called Euro-Americas. Thanks to the industrialization, the traditional society got restructured and it contributed in the disappearance of slavery. New social classes consolidated, like the middle class, which were small entrepreneurs, engineers, and physicians between others, and also the worker class, which were factory and skilled laborers. The family got reshaped, the economy production moved out of the house, and there was created a separation of work and family life. Men wages became the main source of income in the family. The middle class men looked to continue educating themselves for a better performance in the job. The worker class had other interests and activities that were not approved by the middle and upper class. Women were unable to leave their home and work in the industry because they needed to take care of their children and the home chores. Young women were expected to work until marriage to save money for their future family. There was also a high demand of women as domestic servants in other homes. Middle class women would rarely work outside their home, they would mostly keep a role as wives and mothers. Families were in the need of the extra wage that their children could take home in order to survive. In 1840, a law was created restricting children in the industrial labor. Children's role got redefined. Society needed educated labor force, and the education became a law requirement for children, at least until the age of 10. Socialists were seeking for social equality. They criticized the difference in wealth between captains of industry and laborers. Socialists condemned also the exploitation of women and children in the industry. They were seeking for a just and equitable society. Utopian socialists. So were called Charles Fourier and Robert Owen. They were businessmen that fought for equality and made better conditions for workers and their community. Some improvements that they implemented were better wages, fair prices of goods, and education for children between others. They set their community as a model for the rest of the world. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels believed that capitalism divided people into capitalists and proletariat. They said that competition between capitalists tend to create an unavoidable exploitation of the proletariat to keep up pace in the market. They also believed that all institutions of the state were in favor of capitalism and in favor of maintaining them with power. The Communist Manifesto was a document created by Marx and Engels in which the abolition of private property is encouraged. It was believed that a social revolution would lead to a dictatorship of the proletariat, it would abolish private property, and it would also destroy the capital structure. In the 19th century, socialism became popular and it spread throughout Europe and the world. Government authorities began to set rights to protect the working class. They finally recognized that they were responsible for the welfare of their citizens. Some programs that were put in practice were retirement pensions, minimum wage, sickness, accident, unemployment insurance, and regulation of hours. Trade unions were entities that were seeking a balance. They seek for the welfare of employees, but also seek for the continuous development of capitalism. Industrial powers obtained raw materials from pre-industrial countries and maintained control over the trade. It caused damage in local industries and economies because of the inexpensive and incomparable prices of products available from the outside. During the 19th century, the demand of raw materials increased due to the population growth from European countries. The industries fueled their demand of products with raw materials brought from Americas, Africa, Asia, and Eastern Europe. The mechanization of industries produced large demands of raw materials. In some colonies like Canada, Uruguay, and South Africa, the specialization in the production of primary goods boosted their development in the economic and social aspect. The high wage income incorporated in these lands developed the economy because it let it flourish and encouraged entrepreneurs to find a way to invent a labor saving technology. On the other side, there were territories like most colonies in Latin America, Sub Saharan Africa, Asia, and Southeast Asia. They were producers of raw materials for big industrial economies. Plantations were owned by big economies, which would take most of the profits abroad. Territories were deprived of profits, what didn't allow their economy to develop, and all their workers received low wages. Thank you everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed it.